Alright boys, in today's video, I'm going to be finishing off the top 5s that I started a couple of months ago when I was doing the top 5s for the different quick AoEs, quick single targets, buster AoEs, all of those types of different top 5s. I'm going to finish those out by doing the top 5 support type servants, which I meant to do. And by the way, if there's any specific top 5 you want to see me cover in the future, go ahead and leave that in the comments down below. But yeah, this is definitely an interesting video to make. You guys can probably predict the units that are going to be on the top 5, but maybe not the order that they're going to be in. I definitely think I've ironed out this list just quite a bit. Although the units that are going to be on the honorable mention, I'm really going to have to explain this and make sure this is really clear. But before we begin, if you guys enjoy these more discussion-based FGO videos, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what other discussion videos you would like to see me talk about. But let's just kind of go ahead and talk real quick about some of the honorable mention people. And this is already probably going to put some people and make them a little upset. But so I have in the honorable mentions people like Himiko, Oberon, Miss Crane, Tamamo, Reigns, people like this. The reason I have them there is because, say in the case of Himiko, Himiko is very Giga specifically altered towards buster servants, right? And so one of the things that I'm looking at when it comes to the top 5 is that they are either just really generically splashable and they offer just so many things that any team composition would really want, or they are so giga invested into their specific card type that they actually warp the game around said card type. And while Himiko is very, very strong and she definitely makes buster teams very good, she's not like Koyanskaya, right? Or she's not someone like Merlin, for instance, right? Where she is literally warping the format of the game because of how good they are. She's just actually a very, very strong support and a very good tool to have if you want to run a buster team. The same thing can be said for Tamamo. Tamamo, very, very strong if you want to put her in an arts team, but she's no Castoria, right? But still a very, very good thing to have in your toolbox if you want to run an arts team. Oberon, he's actually very generic, and in fact, he almost cracks top 5. The only thing that I really don't like, because you guys see here that he does give a buster buff, but everything here, this is all generic, right? Like the NP damage, the party NP, the massive battery, stars, anybody wants that. So really, and then he just gasses up your NP damage by an insane amount. Any servant can use that, whether they're quick, arts, doesn't matter. This is just kind of like, if you're not a buster servant, you can't use it, but you can use the massive NP damage buff. It's just the fact that his NP really doesn't offer any support. He actually just has a legitimately offensive NP. And you could say that, well, he does put people to sleep, but then he also makes them invincible, right? Which, isn't the best thing in the world. So he just almost was right there. It's just the non-supporting NP is kind of what just kind of ruined it a little bit for me. And unlike someone like Koyanskaya, I just think it was a little not exactly there, because at least even Koyanskaya on her NP is still offering support, even though it's also a damaging NP. So again, just kind of barely missed out on the top 5. Miss Crane, same thing. Miss Crane's very generic, just kind of good for any crit team, but she's a little janky to use, and because of that jankiness, it adds too much of a skill curve to her. And again, what we're looking at are just these almost brain dead supports, right? They're so good because not only their effects are insane, but you just slap them in there and you can just start tapping buttons and you just destroy the game, right? That's what makes them so OP, right? Miss Crane, Tamamo, even Oberon to an extent, and Himiko, you actually got to think a lot, and that's why they're not super insane and in the highest tiers of the meta, even though I think they contend for those spots, right? It's just the fact that you actually have to think, because I mean, dude, people could barely get around using Janako's third skill. They could barely get around using Ishtar's third skill. Melt, when she first came out, it was dog, if it's not if you have to think about it, you have to use his second skill and you gotta think, it's they're not gonna be as quote unquote in the meta, right? Not to be mean, but people want to use the brain dead click 3 buttons, destroy the game servants. Not well, if I use this now, I'm gonna lose my NP tomorrow. No, they don't want to think about that, right? So hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from. I do think all of them are insanely good. Definitely could crack in the top 5 if you wanted to put them in there. I could definitely understand all of them being in there, especially with someone like Reigns, because Obviously, I think since he's not here in the honorable mentions, you guys know Waver is going to be in the top 5 somewhere. So with that being said, though, let's go ahead and move into number 5, and that is actually going to be Merlin. Merlin is one of those servants that I really thought about, and I was like, you know what? Realistically, Merlin is very generic in everything he does. The attack buff is generic. It's not specific to any card type. Every team composition would like that. The NP is very good. The AoE on-demand invincibility is absolutely insane. That just whenever you want, you can just bam, make your whole party invincible. The star generation is nice. I suppose this is kind of also some nice niche support, but it's really that carrying the skill. He has the buster buff here, but this is the only thing that he actually gives that is specific to a card type, because the max HP anybody can use, and everybody loves having 100% crit damage. And then he still just has one of the more bonkers NP in the game. I mean, it looks simple, but it's like the fact that you can just start stacking the stars, NP gain, and the HP very, very quickly, especially with double Merlin, things can get very disgusting very quickly, right? Like, I remember when Merlin first came out, I was trying to use double Merlin plus Quetzalcoatl to beat Goetia, and it literally just turned into a double Merlin main DPS beatdown. Like, they were just spamming their NP so much that they were just like, we're just going to start poking Goetia ourselves. Well, don't worry, Quetzalcoatl, we'll take him out. And, like, the guy just offers pretty much everything that any team could possibly want. And it's actually why, even to this day, you see in, like, these stall teams based around, like, one of the more popular ones that I really like is the Merlin, Morgan, Castoria one, right? Merlin is still very relevant there because of everything that he gives. Everything he gives is pretty generic, and it's very, very strong in a lot of these setups. And so I have him here at number 5 for that reason in particular. I could see somebody not keeping him at number 5 because the thing that is very weak about Merlin is the fact that he only gives 20% NP on demand, right? And that is a very bad thing on his record, right? That he only gives 20%. And it's actually why I have the number 4 spot a little higher than him, Waver, over here, because I think Waver's actually standing the test of time a little bit better. And even though people kind of look at him as like, oh, he's like the free-to-play support that everybody has that came out in year 1, he was like the first main support in the game, the dude is still holding up because everything that Waver does is insanely good. The fact that he can just give 50% to one of your party members, 20% to everybody else, and he quite literally more so than Merlin gives every generic buff you could possibly want. He's giving you attack on his 3rd skill. He's giving you defense plus damage cut to make your team very tanky, and he's giving your one of your allies just, again, what is kind of the standard for crit damage at 50% for 3 turns. And his NP, I'm sure you all know it and love it. It's very, very strong. It reduces all enemies NP gauge by 1. Reducing the defense is very strong for increasing the damage of any subsequent NPs that are going to follow Waver's, or any crits that are going to follow Waver's NP. And then the chance for an AoE stun, again, is very, very clutch in a lot of moments. Like, it saved me so many times, especially if you guys have been seeing me do challenge quests and challenge runs on stream as we go through like the story and stuff. Waver is just insanely clutch when it comes to his NP. And I think people are actually starting to realize how good Waver actually is, because more and more people are gaining access to him. Now, this is why I was also saying you could argue Reigns should also be in the top 5 as well, because Reigns is really strong for a lot of the same reasons that Waver is. The problem, though, is that Reigns is, again, a more specific support, whereas Waver is like this generic 50%. You can put him in literally any team comp. You can run him in Scotty setups, in Koyanskaya setups, in Castoria setups. You can run double Waver and still do really well. You can run Waver Merlin and still do very, very well, because Waver just puts in a lot of work with him pretty much giving you everything you could possibly want outside of just a specific card buff. And I think he is actually the embodiment of what a generic support type servant should look like. And when it comes to Reigns, Reigns is kind of like Waver in the way that she gives 50%, but she is more specifically tailored to being a defensive servant, right? She pretty much takes the defensive aspect of Waver and like cranks it up to 11, right? Like, she's clearly supposed to be a generic defensive support, someone that's really good to run in like setups that you really need to stall out or you need to survive for a bit. Very good pairs out with Mash as well, who's another free-to-play servant who's very, very good if you want to do more tanky builds. But yeah, I just think Waver really just comes down in like 4th place for being like, this is the guy that is like the generic support type servant in my eyes. And Merlin, for me, I think, again, it is a little difficult because Merlin, depending on the day, I could probably cite Oberon in there, but I just like the fact that where Oberon kind of loses support points for me because of his NP, Merlin has one of the most broken NPs in the game still to this day, just because, again, it gives you very generic support type things. From here, it should be a very obvious trip to first, second, and third place. In third place, you have Scotty. Now, this kind of ties into what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, that I highly value for this list. Just generic, very easy to use support type servants. But there are servants that crack above that are just so invested into buffing one card type that they actually warp the meta. And we had the Scotty meta for a reason, and Scotty is still an insanely good servant still to this day, even though characters like Koyanskaya and Castoria definitely outnumber her when it comes to how strong they are. Scotty is still very, very strong. Like, she still makes a lot of the other supports in the game look like chump change because she's still broken, and that's the reason why when they brought Scotty back on JP, people still went nuts and were still summoning for her because Scotty is still absolutely broken. And again, she is really just heavily investing into buffing quick type servants. In the same vein as Merlin, she gives the massive quick buff to the ally that she's trying to buff, which is insanely good for quick servants in particular because it's buffing up their NP gain as well. It is now allowing them to loop. But then if you look at Merlin, where it's like, well, he only gives the 100% crit damage for one turn, that's good, it's splashable to everybody. Scotty is giving you that 100% crit damage to your quick cards, which you're going to be primarily using anyway for 3 turns. So you have 3 turns of, with double Scotty, 200% quick crit damage. You can really just obliterate the competition. The fact that she lowers enemies' defense is very good for wave 3 farming, or if you're doing a boss where you're going to be there for all 3 turns, you can abuse all 3 turns of this double defense down from both of your Scotties. Negative 60% defense just allows you to destroy the competition. And then again, she was one of the first servants to be like, hey, here's 50% battery, just bam, I'm just going to drop that on somebody. No restrictions, just here's 50% NP, and it's just absolutely disgusting for farming, for challenge quests. It just allows you to be giga consistent. And Scotty, in a way, was the servant that fixed a lot of the other quick servants that were a little inconsistent. People like Maid, Alter, and Skahawk, who could be a little inconsistent or like janky in the way that their gameplay went. You know, Scotty, or not Scotty, but Skahawk having problems regenning her NP after she fired it the first time, and Maid Alter kind of having similar issues that it was kind of hard for her to get the ball rolling, even though she could hit really hard. Scotty pretty much fixed all of that, right? Like, she gave them massive amounts of NP gain with her first skill and her third skill, just being able to just dump that 50% right into them. Just basically fixed a lot of these servants. And after they actually buffed her NP, this is actually a little insane, because if you look at this, she just is stacking their attack on a 5-turn cooldown. Keep in mind, this is already a charisma that you can now actually start striving to get. Once you start getting Scotty's NP, this is actually something you might want to start getting now, because you could start stacking their attack by a massive amount, and then God forbid you have an NP5 Scotty, and you could start just stacking up their crit damage as well. It only lasts for 3 attacks, but you can start stacking it together, which, if you want to look at her NP does actually just work in any party, right? If you're going to use Scotty, while she is best to be taken advantage of in a quick setup, she definitely has, like, the fact that, like, this is generic and that's generic, and this NP is good for just literally anybody who wants to just start stacking massive amounts of damage. She gets really insane for that, right? The only weak point I would say for Scotty is that her survivability is not technically the best, because a lot of the other support type servants have ways on their skills to go ahead and just protect their main DPS servants. But the fact that she at least still does have a party-wide way to protect the entire party is very, very significant. So I guess this is the part that people are going to be really looking forward to, like, who is number 2 and who is number 1. And based on the way that I've been talking, Koyanskaya is obviously going to be number 2, and Castoria over here is going to be number 1. And here's the reason why I also have Koyanskaya listed at 2 and Castoria at 1. And it simply comes down to the way that their setups are performed. Koyanskaya is almost like oppressively powerful, right? The fact that she can just give 50% NP gauge, reducing skill cooldown, just insanely good, just different damage mods that she can double buff people up with, right? Absolutely insane. Gives them the ability to refund NP with their buster cards. Double Koyanskaya, congratulations, your buster cards are now arts cards. Provide stars from them to already start destroying people, and then gives them the star weight specifically to the buster cards after providing them with the stars, and just allows them to go to town on obliterating people. Now, she still gives the same buster buff as Merlin, but she only gives half of what he does, but it lasts for all 3 turns, right? So you can actually use it for more long base fights, and you can actually like drag it out. And then even though her NP itself is actually a damaging NP, she not only refunds the party's NP, but she also has the waiver drain effect on all enemies. And she hits quite hard because of her passive 20% buff here and the 20% attack she gets here. Those multiply into each other. It actually does allow her to do quite a bit of chunking damage. So she is pretty good. It's just the problem with Koyanskaya is that she's very demanding on you having a very strong box, right? Koyanskaya is very similar to someone like Scotty. What I think holds their metas back right now is that they want specific servants to be able to work with, right? Ideally, Koyanskaya wants you to have like a buster servant with a, like, they already have their own 50% battery, and you know, if you don't have that, then she wants you to have a 30% battery servant with like a max limit broken K scope, right? It's that she demands a lot from you, right? The reason I can still also safely put her above Scotty is that Scotty pretty much demands that you have a max limit broken K scope. Like, Scotty's like, look, you cannot have a max limit broken K scope and kind of get by with either the servant being really broken like Parvati, or using combinations of guys like plug suiting out your Scotty for a Paracelsus, right? Something like that. But again, at the end of the day, the name of the game also when it comes to farming is being quick and efficient, right? You want to be as fast as possible. And it sounds a little ridiculous, but you lose a lot of time plug suiting around, right? Especially if you have an older phone that can kind of lag a little bit. And man, when you're farming those boxes, you know, you're missing out on a lot. Like, unironically, the time adds up, right? Like, I really wasn't a person that cared about it a whole lot until like someone showed me the numbers on it, and I was like, dude, you actually do lose a lot of time. So it's like, the point is that you want your support type servant to pretty much be able to do it themselves. And I think it is also very telling that if you don't have that stuff, you need to bring in other sub-support type members to make them work, right? That's also one of the things that I kind of hold against Scotty for people that don't have maximum broken K-scopes. It's like, the fact you have to bring in Paracelsus tells me something about Scotty, right? It tells me something about her meta as opposed to like someone like Castoria over here, who Castoria literally just tells you, don't worry, if you've got an art servant, I'm gonna make them loop, right? I will take care of them, okay? She's like, I have everything that they could ever possibly want. I have a very, very strong, basically power corrupt version of Merlin's first skill. I have an absolutely broken second skill that allows me to give 50% to one ally in total, and then 30% to the entire party, and buff the entire party's NP gain by 30%, and give them a massive arts buff, and give them a special damage mod against the hardest enemies in the game, and give them an invincibility whenever they want. And then if I can get to my NP, which is not all that hard to do, I'm going to give you another massive charisma. Keep in mind, if you actually level up her NP by getting higher NP copies, that's a 50% charisma for 3 turns. Absolutely insane. That is actually like the equivalent. Well, I mean, technically, Scotty stacks based on this as well, but Scotty stacks for 5 turns, only does 30% on this, so it's like Castoria is probably going to stack a bit faster, just saying. Then, like, she also removes the entire party's debuffs, which is absolutely insane. And then she gives you a buff that the only way the enemy can get around this is by straight up having buff removal, right? Like, it's absolutely dummy insane, right? She's so good. And that does play a huge role into it, is the fact that, like, Scotty and Koyanskaya, Scotty more so, needs your box to already be strong to be as effective as possible. Koyanskaya is a bit more lenient, but she still wants you to have some of the top tier servants. Castoria just kind of wants you to have blue cards, right? Like, she's like, just have blue cards, and I'm gonna make your servants loop, right? And like, that's why I still hold her as like, not only like the best support type servant in the game, but literally like probably the best servant in the game, period. Like, I think she's like the most valuable servant you can get your grubby little mitts on, right? Which is why I'm pushing so hard that people don't summon for Castoria, or not, don't summon for other servants and summon and save for Castoria, right? Because I think she's legitimately that good. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Remember, let's try to keep this non-toxic. Let's remember, we're all fans of FGO here, right? We all like the game. We're just having a nice discussion, okay? So drop your top 5 comments down below. Keep it civil down there. I know we all have differing opinions, but you know what I'm saying? Like, let's just try to keep it civil, all right? Drop in the comments as well other discussions you guys want to see me do. I'll make sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, oh yeah, by the way, come out to my streams every weekday over my Twitch. I stream just a whole host of games. I stream everything from like FGO to Elden Ring to streaming custom Robo, and we're streaming Master Duel. So I stream pretty much everything over there. Primarily FGO, but sometimes I take a break to play something else. But yeah, I love seeing you guys. I love hanging out with you guys on the stream. But yeah, with all that being said, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.